So we left off with this work, and what we saw with this work was that the making of the work was kind of based on a system that included communities of people outside of the studio. In a way, the work is dependent on what happens outside of the studio. And in a lot of ways, you kind of have to think that our interpretation of this, the way we make sense of it, is in one way or another kind of dependent on conceptualism. I mean, we have a lot of work. Well, we'll back up a little bit. We were talking about conceptual art primarily as as a preoccupation with language, the way the language works on us, but also that a lot of conceptual art, especially in the work that we read from Sol LeWitt, his essays, his paragraphs and sentences, was that conceptual art starts with a concept, a set of rules, and the rules are meaningful, and the making of the work is a kind of operation of the rules, right? That's sort of what we saw. And that the way that you read those works is not necessarily by looking at the thing, what does it represent, but you read into the process or the rules, the systems, the strategy, the concept that determined the making of the thing. In a lot of ways, we've got a lot of work going on today that is, it kind of comes out of the conceptual tradition, if you can call it a tradition. What do we call this? Is this conceptualism? No, conceptualism is too, this will be a little unfair, but conceptualism is too cold. It's too stuffy. This comes out of a conceptual tradition in a way. We read it through a conceptual grid, I think. So we could call it, I guess, a neo-conceptualism or a post-conceptualism. Now, I don't know, that is sort of stuffy language as well, nerdy language, but I think it's at least important that we see that what we've been studying over the last couple decades undergirds and informs how we're reading work today. Does that make some sense? There are strategies, even if you don't wind up being a conceptual artist in the 1970s version of the term. There are a lot of tools there that can be utilized in other ways, and a lot of tools that are necessary for reading this work, interpreting this work. Okay, so some of the strategies we saw going on in this Tree of Life work we see in a lot of other artists. The emphasis on the social sphere, the public sphere, as being the place where the work is made from, that it is integrated into some kind of a social action or political action, and that it's got some kind of a conceptual engine behind it, in that you read it based on the rules that went into making the work. We've talked a little bit about street art in past classes, and I think we could bring it up again here, because certainly that the public sphere, the social action, the work as being generated from a concept that is worked out among people, there's a lot of that going on in the last in the last decade, and a lot of it going on in what is being loosely called street art. One of the artists we could talk about is a guy named J.R. If any of you have taken some photo classes here recently, you probably are aware of J.R. Yeah, anyone study him? Couple? Not many. Okay, if you've taken a class with Kurt, you might know of J.R. J.R. is a young guy. I mean, it's sort of humbling how young he is. And basically his working strategy is he's a photographer, but the exhibition space is not primarily the gallery or the museum, but it is on the surface of buildings, the surface of cities. So what he does is goes into particular locations, in this case a kind of a really poor part of Rio de Janeiro, and meets people, interacts with the people, and ends up the primary medium for interacting with the people there is photography. And so he asks, he talks with them and asks them if he can take portraits of them, and those portraits are eventually blown up, printed, huge, gigantic, and then wheat pasted onto the sides of buildings. So there's this kind of idea that the buildings have faces, and the faces that they have are the faces of the people who live in that place, right? So the buildings speak. The buildings have faces. There are real people associated with them. And particularly, they have eyes. I think eyes are an important thing for JR, that the buildings are able to see, and when we look at the buildings, we have to kind of make eye contact with them. We can't just regard it as that general poor area or something. There are eyes, there are faces, real people who are there. And this work is what some of the wheat pasted faces that are around campus are based on. So the class that did those was studying JR at the time, and JR was recently in Long Beach for the TED convention. He won the TED Prize this last year, which is kind of, for those of you who aren't familiar with the TED Prize, it's basically just a bunch of people, executives from Google and whoever, who get together and they want to talk and get presentations from really interesting people who are doing interesting things, and then those interesting people pitch an idea. And they pitch the idea, and if the people in attendance like it, they just start committing money to it. So he wins this $100,000 TED Prize, and then a sort of funding to continue this kind of work. Anyway, that's nice. And I think if we include this in the street art movement, we do have to make some distinctions in the street art movement, because there are different things going on, right? I mean, probably the most famous of these street artists that has been talked about a lot lately, and that we talked a little bit about in one of the classes, is Banksy. You're all aware of Banksy. I mean, Banksy has a similar strategy of work coming out of the public sphere and in the public sphere, but his aim is almost entirely subversion of the public sphere, right? He is a critic of the way that societies control people through signage and through regulation and through images and so on. And so he makes images in that public sphere. And that includes in galleries. We've been talking about some of the kind of critique, postmodern critique of the way history is told, the way it's mediated, the way that a museum mediates history, tells history. And Banksy is one who is kind of a guerrilla street artist in the museum. I believe this is the, oh shoot, I didn't include it in my notes. This isn't the Brooklyn Museum. What museum is this? It's not the Louvre. I don't remember what it is, which one it is. But he'll just go into these museums and hang his own work and then leave, and often with its own signage and everything. And it's always aimed at a kind of subversion of these things. So this particular painting is a portrait of a young, a refined aristocrat who's wearing a gas mask, and he hangs it and leaves. So it's a kind of the public working in the public space, but it's all critique, it's all subversion, and that might be due. There might be some good to that. At any rate, I think he views what he's doing as a kind of a guerrilla offensive, right? That for him, the colors he uses are his way of sort of doing battle with what he perceives to be the oppressive aspects of the culture. I think in contrast to Banksy, and I'm just going to show these two street artists and then move on. But I think it's important for those of you who are interested in street art to kind of look at how do these artists regard the society that the public sphere in which they're making the work. Banksy versus JR might be one kind of contrast that you can make. This is another one of JR's works. It's called Women Are Heroes. This is specifically, he went to a village in Kenya and did a similar thing there, met the people, talked to the people, took photographs of them, specifically the women, again focused on eyes, and then had the photos, in this case, blown up into massive vinyl tarps that were then placed on the roofs so that they looked up, the eyes looked up into the sky off of the earth, but they also doubled as, the reason he printed them on vinyl is that they double as roofing material. I don't know how long they'll survive, but for the time being, they function as roofing material. And he also has done this in Shanghai and a variety of other places, but faces of local inhabitants associated with buildings, sometimes the buildings that are in some sort of crisis or dilapidation. And I think it's worth noting that all of his images are wheat-pasted paper, so they are temporary. They last for a little while and then they deteriorate and are gone. They're fragile things. They're fragile faces. A couple of these that are pretty interesting images. Anything you want to say about that contrast or that pairing, Banksy, JR? I mean, I think there are probably virtues and vices to both of them that we could sort out a little bit further. But at any rate, in light of the art history we've looked at in this class, the public space, the public sphere, the surface of buildings, the streets, our everyday performances, routines, have, for I think obvious reasons that we've covered in this class, become sites for art making and means of art making. And this might be one way in which that's being played out. Seems to be a noise problem for these people in Shanghai. I mean, at least that seems to be part of the work. We become more aware of their ears than their eyes in the Shanghai work, which is sort of interesting. Other possible ways of thinking about public space that seem to be kind of post-critical in a way. Carol Hummel is an interesting artist who makes sweaters and cozies for city spaces. So she calls these knitscapes, or sometimes they're called like meter cozies or tree cozies, where she goes into these public spaces and makes sweaters for the trees and the parking meters and so on. Why do that? What does that do for you? Like if you were walking down the street and you saw the trees wearing sweaters. What's that? Yeah. Yeah.
It seemed like her artwork is like hugging whatever.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. The kind of the attitude of the work seems to be, oh, I care about the trees.
It's also giving fun to like things that aren't normally fun, like parking meters.
Yeah.
Trees on like a block.
Yeah. Yeah.
Things that are kind of drab and dull and everything.
Yeah.
Really full of whimsy and like.
Yeah. Whimsy is a nice word for it.
Hasn't this become like a movement too now? Like bombing or something?
It's called what? Bombing?
I don't
Knit balm, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm not as aware of the knitting, the public knitting actions. But this is certainly part of a broader movement that artists are participating in, where it's rather than critiquing public space, improving it. So planting flowers, there are all these groups in LA who are kind of guerrilla gardeners, is what they call themselves, where they'll go to these sort of barren places, just barren sidewalks, sometimes with dirt patches but nothing in them, and they'll just start planting flowers, unauthorized, but planting flowers in medians, like center medians and things like that.
When we went to the second part of MoCA,
Yeah, the Geffen.
there was what's it called? Like a water pipe,
Ah.
a drain that was all knitted around.
Oh, nice. Oh, good. I didn't see it.
It wasn't like in the museum, it was like on the side. That was the only
Yeah. Well, and that's very much the point. It's not, it doesn't go in the museum. It is public space. Yeah. Good. So if any of you are into gardening, you might become guerrilla gardeners. I'm sure the city can't mind that much, huh? Illegal gardening. As long as you're not gardening, you know. And I think this general push towards artwork as serving, or what is it, as beautiful actions, gracious actions, gentle actions in a space, whether it is a rural space, like with Andy Goldsworthy, where it's all natural materials in natural settings, creating natural forms, or whether it's public spaces. Or like city spaces, urban spaces, it seems like the public space has become an important site and a contested site for art making. And it does seem like the reintroduction of beauty and whimsy and a kind of graciousness seems to be, for lack of a better term, post-critical. But it's coming out of those critical traditions. I mean, this stuff comes out of installation, performance, and conceptual art making from mid to late century. It comes out of those traditions, it just becomes kind of post-critical, if you will. Somewhat perhaps related to this, but going back inside the museum, we'll kind of keep flip-flopping. Actually, yeah, we'll flip-flop back and forth in the museum, outside of the museum. This is an artist named Wolfgang Laib. Wolfgang. And he's a fascinating character. He's German, and he's a Buddhist, and he's a very devout Buddhist. And his work is always it takes a minimalist form. So if we've been talking about performance and conceptualism and those sort of things informing this post-critical work, I want to show you a couple artists who are sort of post-minimalist in a way, if that makes any sense. Post-critical minimalists, they're kind of coming out of the minimalist tradition. Wolfgang Laib, as I was saying, is a Buddhist, and his work is a kind of extended meditation, Buddhist meditation. And so what this is pollen. It's all collected flower pollen that he collects over a long period of time through very laborious means. I mean, where do you get this much pollen? You have to work at it quite a bit to get just a little bit. So he collects them collects it for a long period of time, and then will sort of sift them, doing kind of almost like Buddhist sand paintings, if you've ever seen any of that being done. Sort of painting with this pollen, creating this field of bright yellow, usually is what it is. He also does some work with rice and with marble. He hand sands marble. And I should have put one of these in, but he has these things called a milkstone, where he hand sands marble so that it has a slight recess in the middle, and then he pours milk in it so that it's a sort of, there's milk sitting on top, so it's a solid white sort of minimalist form. But here you have this field of yellow pollen, perhaps once again associated with growth, newness of life, springtime, that's been kind of laboriously collected and painted with as a sort of dusting. For him, this is, as I said, a spiritual exercise. And I think we'll get a lot of that comes back into contemporary art making in this last decade, is a renewed interest in spirituality, in faith, in belief, from a variety of different angles. But it's very much back in the conversation, if you will. Anything you want to say about Wolfgang Laib? I'm sort of just going to continue to fly over some people. But any questions or additional readings about that? Yeah.
Well, I guess just thinking about it as related to minimalism, but like post-minimalistic,
Yeah.
critical or whatever, it seems to draw attention to. I feel like minimalism almost draws attention to synthetic things, almost.
Yes.
Where this draws attention to, it seems like little things that you wouldn't otherwise think about.
Yeah.
Little materials, simple things, and you think about them as beautiful rather than like, I don't know, victorious. Like we have achieved box
Pure
now.
simplicity. Yeah.
So I just think it's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. It's organic rather than synthetic material. It comes from the landscape.
And it also doesn't seem like its goal is to like conquer or exclude, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like it's very gentle.
Yeah.
Very humble and very delicate.
Yeah.
It invites your attention but doesn't demand it.
Ah, that's nicely put. And I suppose along those lines, when you wrestle with the old school minimalism, you kind of, from all of those artists, you're going to get a lot of text written. It's a philosophical argument, it's a philosophical kind of conclusion, a philosophical manifesto in some ways. I don't know that they would like me using that word, but in some ways. Whereas you don't get that from him, you won't get that from him. You're not going to get extended explanation or argumentation. It's a kind of meditative process that invites you in, I guess, rather than argues you through something. Yeah, it's nice. So you can look further into his work if you're interested. Sticking with the minimalist business and going back to, I think, probably more traditional minimalism, is an artist named Anish Kapoor. He's based out of Britain, but is Indian born. And his work is going to be more traditionally minimalist in the forms that it uses and in the materials. Often he'll use highly polished stainless steel. And in this case, so you get this minimalist form, and we could just think about it in terms of minimalism, but it seems to be doing other things, right? For instance, flipping the world upside down, for one. And as the title is, it's in Jerusalem, situated in Jerusalem, and he creates this kind of beautiful, elegant, very simple, minimal forms, minimal materials, but the shaping of it is not just pure presence or pure, simple material presence, but is an optical experience that looking at it is inverting the world, turning it upside down. You find yourself upside down, the space of Jerusalem you find upside down, there's a sort of an upside down experience that he wants you to have. But it refers you back to the landscape. So it's not at all pure minimalist form in the sense it's purely present and we just contemplate the form, because it points us back out to the landscape. Does that make some sense? So we might call this post-minimalism. Again, all those phrases are sort of dorky, but like the post-neo whatever. All that's sort of dorky, but if it's a kind of placeholder for you for like, okay, this comes out of that. It's connected to that. It's related to that. Fine, use that, and then you can get rid of the phrase. Good. For those of you who've been to Chicago, you're familiar with another of Anish Kapoor's sculptures. Have any of you seen this in person? Have you been to Chicago? Yeah? What's your, oh yeah, you guys are from Chicago, huh? What's been your experience of this thing?
Well, I mean, we've been going since we were kids, and it never gets old, which is cool. It's like it's the one place where you can see the whole skyline if you walk around it.
Yes.
Oh, it's like really beautiful, and it's cool because it like changes. It's totally a different atmosphere at night as it is during the day. Two totally different sculptures. It's literally just like an object that represents the city.
Yes.
It's incredible, but it's just it's all about like this shape. It does that, but then along with that, it's cool because underneath you can look up, and it's kind of all these different illusions. But you find yourself just kind of interacting with random people, and it's just a really great way. It like brings people together, which is cool.
Yeah, yeah.
The bean is awesome.
Yes. Yeah, the technical title is Cloudgate, but it's affectionately referred to as the Bean for obvious reasons. Huh? So I should probably just, who cares? Cloudgate, it's the Bean. Yeah, anyone else who's seen it that wants to add to that?
Well, I mean, I'm from Chicago as well, so I've
Yeah.
seen it. It's like the one place, it's like in this like open platform, and there's people around it all the time.
Yeah.
Taking pictures in it is like a big deal, and there's always like regular like people inside, outside, and stuff.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people really see it.
Yeah, and that's a sort of shift. I mean, that's something new for contemporary art, isn't it? that people like it.
It brings together all kinds of people and not just a selective audience.
Yeah.
Where it's literally everybody that walks by is interested and can enjoy it.
Yep.
Not just certain people who get
Yep.
to be invited.
Yep. And that's one of the real tricks to making art today, I think. But also one of the really exciting parts is that your task, I think, or perhaps the most interesting work that's being made, are artists who are simultaneously making sense of this tradition, the last 50, 60, 100 years of art making that has tended to be disconnected from the public. Public doesn't understand it, doesn't like it, fine. But to make sense of that tradition and to also start making it more relevant, more interesting, more just simply enjoyable to the communities in which the artwork is existing. I mean, that's been one of the real shortcomings, I think, of the last few decades that we've been looking at in class, is that for all of the talk about living life and the kind of postmodern critiques about, it's the community that forms you and all of that stuff, the art has been remarkably cold and distant and unliked by the communities that they're talking about and by the oppressed that they're defending and so on, right? I think there's quite a bit that's exciting in the last 10 years or so in artists like Anish Kapoor that have a great deal of, there's a lot of kind of conceptual integrity to a work like this, and it is beautiful, it's moving, it brings people together, as you were saying. Yeah, good. And similar to that hourglass work that we saw, and as was pointed out, it really does, in a way, it's an object that people gather around and are very interested in, but in looking at it, you're just looking at the world around you in a way. The highly reflective surface is meant to point you back to the skyline, back to the people around you, back to the world around you, the sky, and so on. Yeah, good. Anish Kapoor, I'm not going to show it, but he did a very large installation at the Turbine Hall as well. So if you want to go online and look at that, you can check that out. Was someone?
We have an installation in Paris right now. It's called the Leviathan. Or am I on?
No, I think that's true. Well, I think the Leviathan is, I think that was the work that he did at the Turbine Hall. He may have reinstalled it in Paris. Yeah, maybe so. Maybe so. I think the Leviathan is the one he did for the Turbine Hall. Good. There's much more to look at with Anish Kapoor. And the work that he does inside the gallery, and I should have chosen a different one than this, I think. But they are, again, kind of minimal forms, minimalist forms, somewhat reminiscent of Robert Irwin and others. But they all seem to be kind of deep visual experiences, if that makes any sense. Deep space. They seem to open up holes that you go into, and in that sense seem to have kind of there seems to be a spiritual undercurrent to a lot of the work that he does for the galleries, I think. They seem to be kind of meditative experiences. And speaking of meditative spiritual experiences, and looking at a little video, we haven't looked at a whole lot of video in this class. Most of the video we've been looking at has been serving as documentation, right? That video became a means of documenting these everyday performances that were happening. And in that sense, kind of operated in a sort of a very second-hand removed kind of way. In the last, I think, 2 decades especially, video has been, video artists have started to use video not as a means of documenting performances, but kind of as, I don't know, moving paintings almost. Paintings that are temporal, that unfold over time. Sort of related to film, where you construct narratives, but they seem to be tighter than that, little vignettes, visual paintings. One of the most interesting video artists working today, I think, is a local guy. Bill Viola lives in Long Beach. He's close. This is one of his works called The Crossing. And The Crossing is composed of 2 videos. And if you want to go online, YouTube has a few examples, like just someone shooting it, standing in a museum. And at least you get the idea. They're not great videos, but you get the idea. And it consists of 2 videos. One is a man who walks, it opens by a man walking up a walkway in very slow motion. It's slowed really way down, and most of his work is slowed way down. And the man stops, and water starts to drip on his head, a little bit more, and then it's a torrential sort of dumping of water on him. Eventually to the point where it's falling everywhere, and eventually to the point where it obscures him entirely, and once the water ceases to drop, he's gone, as though he's kind of taken in the water or dissolved in the water. That's one of the videos. The other one is the same thing, same man, same location, who then starts on fire and burns, and also, like with the water, is eventually totally consumed in the flame, so that when the flame dies down, there's no one standing there. The crossing, which I suppose might allude to crossing what? How do you read it? What sense do you make of this video without seeing the video? But imagining it in your mind happening. I mean, we got fire and water, which are, I guess, sort of conflicting elements.
Well, I mean, like, I know some of Viola's other work, and he has, like, some of his other pieces too, there's this sort of, there's one that's like a sheet of water that people walk
Yes.
through, black and white, and they become color, and then they walk back through again, but it's kind of like the sort of bridging of, like, death.
Yeah.
And, like, this sort of, like, the veil between life and death.
Yeah.
And, like, how thin and how fragile it is.
Yep.
And it seems like he's doing something similar here.
Yeah.
It's kind of like this sort of entrance or passing through into, like, another realm or being taken up in, like, water and fire.
Yep. Yes. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. That for him, there's almost always this sort of transition where something turns into something else, something passes through. And it does seem to be some kind of a transcendent realm, whether that is through death or through some sort of transcendent experience. And video, especially really, really slowed down video, is for him the best way of accessing that. This time, slow time in which something happens, but you can't quite pin down exactly when it happens or how it happens. Yeah.
I just wanted to comment on what she said too, because that's kind of like the imagery that I was getting in my head, but it was reminding me more of like blatant biblical
Yeah.
translation, like fire, hell, and water, like
Uh.
water of life, like the Bible. So
Mm-hmm.
what that reminded me of is like this dissension or ascension to heaven or to hell. I don't know what his religious takes are, but sometimes people who aren't Christian like have some sort of like inclination towards that. If they don't
Yeah, absolutely.
or understand it fully.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he would probably, well, I'll give you a little background into his views from what I know. But I think just to kind of sit on your point, I do think he makes lots of biblical references in his work. I don't know that he'd be referring to hell there. I think for him these would be two cleansing, purifying, holy elements. So the fire he's thinking of is not so much the fires of hell, but the fires of the consuming God, the God who consumes or that burns in a bush without consuming it. You sort of get both sets of language in the Exodus.
Talk about being baptized in fire too.
Yep.
The Holy Spirit.
Yep.
So that's also
Yep. Yep. Good. And so much of a kind of cleansing, if you will, that it totally undoes the person or totally absorbs the person or so on. Speaking of Viola's kind of religious positions, he's a deeply religious man, from what I understand, though somewhat eclectic. I think he would probably, if he had to self-identify, he'd probably self-identify as a Buddhist. Once again, he's very interested in Buddhism, but is really well. He's really well studied in Christian mysticism. Pretty much all forms of mysticism he's interested in. When was this? I guess it was maybe a year ago, 2 years ago. I don't remember. I happened to run into him in Seal Beach at a restaurant, and I sort of recognized him and sort of awkwardly went up to him afterwards. And was like, I mean, had to just say hi. Hi. I really like your work. And he's like, well, I don't usually get noticed. He's an artist. Not a celebrity. His face isn't pictured anywhere. So we started talking, and I said, yeah, actually, I just was lecturing about your work last week, I think it was. It was one of these classes. And he's like, well, great. Maybe you can tell me what it means. It's like, I can give it a shot. At any rate, I think that indicates for him that there's this. He's interested in in mystical experiences, transcendent experiences, spiritual experiences that his films try to point at, but can't articulate in a way. It's the ungraspable transition from body to spirit, or from one thing to the next. It's a cleansing that cleanses one so thoroughly that there's kind of no recognition anymore, something like that. So if you hear him talking, he's very articulate. He'll talk poetically around things. He won't give you an argument. For this, I'm critiquing. It's more like, St. John of the Cross said this, and so on and so forth. One more work from Viola. I could show you lots of his stuff. He's very interesting. He's got a website. You can look him up. But this is one of his works that I saw in LACMA several years ago, actually. This is called 5 Angels for the Millennium. It was being shown right at the beginning of the millennium, and it is these 5 angels that are projections, very large video projections, a very, very slow video, once again, of people breaking the surface of water. But it's extremely slow and extremely loud. So all of they're mic'd, and so it would be like peaceful water, it's still, the sound is very subtle, very low, and then you get this just rumbling crash of this slowly exploding kind of person hitting the water, and the head enters or the feet enter or whatever, and it's this kind of loud breaking through the surface of this form, this figure. Sometimes the videos go in forward motion, sometimes in reverse. So I believe, maybe not this one of the other ones at least, I think a couple of them go in reverse. So it's this figure slowly ascending until eventually sucks up out of the water, crosses that plane going in the other direction. They're pretty haunting. There's something about the slowing down the film so much that it moves sort of not painfully slow, it moves satisfyingly slow in a way. It's sort of haunting. And sometimes they're turned upside down, as in this case. And it seems like each of them sort of have a different element, even though they're all water. This one seems to be more of a fiery illusion, whereas others of them perhaps more water, more air, or what have you. I don't know that there's an earth one. At any rate, they're hauntingly beautiful, and remarkably absent of a criticism, a critical edge, and there's certainly no irony or satire or parody there. We have the kind of reemergence of really sincere art making. I mean, not that everyone has been unsincere, but here's a guy who really is thinking poetically about his faith and making work out of it without qualification. He does it really smartly, and he does so in a way that's very, very educated in the last century of art making. If you talk to him, he'll be able to talk circles around you about art history and art theory, but is not sort of going down the drain of theory and history. He's putting it to use in another way, maybe. Anything you want to say about Viola, or questions about him, or his work? I think video art is taking a turn in that direction in a lot of ways. I'll show you 3 more artists here, all of which who are working in kind of sculptural installation. Here's an artist named Donovan. Any of you familiar with Donovan? Yeah, good. Oh, well, lots. So we won't spend too long on her. I think she's a popular one around here. And what is Donovan doing here? Pretty straightforward in terms of she, as she says, makes herself a rule, like she's going to make a sculpture out of styrofoam cups and hot glue. And then the form has to take shape based on that structure that she decides on beforehand. So these forms, she kind of improvises these forms by using these styrofoam cups. And they're remarkably beautiful forms, I guess kind of minimalist forms, but not really. I mean, maybe it's that tradition formalism, I don't know. Extremely beautiful, but also the materials seem to be loaded. What sense do you make of this form being made out of those materials, styrofoam? What does it do for you? What's that?
It's very liquid.
Liquid, yeah. Which maybe is appropriate for the cup. Yeah, good. What else?
It doesn't feel completely hard or solid.
Yeah, malleable. Yeah, good. Good.
The form is a type of, it looks like a kind of growth, but it's made out of like an artificial material.
Yeah, and that's sort of interesting, huh? What sense do you make of that? An artificial material, highly artificial, the kind of material that actually doesn't ever biodegrade, evidently. it just stays for thousands of years and doesn't break down, styrofoam. So an extremely inorganic material that takes on organic form, almost the form of cells growing, reproducing. What do you make of putting those two together?
It kind of echoes itself. The styrofoam is made out of these little pellet cell things.
Good.
So it's this weird multiplication.
Yeah. So it's kind of internally consistent structure. Refers to itself. Yeah. Yeah, good.
Reminds me of teeth.
Teeth.
Like the way you have like the ridges when you
Uh,
like look at teeth up close.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, good. I mean, I guess there may or may not be a kind of environmental edge to this. No, not at all. I mean, that seems to be here. She takes, if you look at the rest of her work, she takes office supplies, things that are kind of manufactured in bulk, and sort of takes these and creates other forms as though they're growing, accumulating these office supplies or disposable materials. It might be, I don't think these are reused, but that would be quite interesting if she was sort of redeeming. At any rate, she's taking something that's disposable and transforming it into something else, getting us to look at styrofoam cups, a disposable, very temporary use sort of thing. I guess redeeming it from its disposability, perhaps. Some close-ups. They're pretty beautiful, at any rate, huh? Yeah. Huh. I suppose we could ask ourselves, why the ceiling? Why does it go on the ceiling rather than the walls or the floor? Clouds.
Kind of like ethereal, like in the sky.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good. And it does seem like they consistently, I'm not showing you any others of hers, but they do consistently refer to landscape in one way or another. Clouds or fog, haze, not so much here, but in another one. Kind of mountains. There's one that's a tar spill that's made out of layers of tar paper, like thousands of sheets of tar paper that are torn so that it looks like a tar spill. Seems to be landscape, taking consumer products and transforming them into landscapes. Seems to be the idea. Maybe replacing these sort of artificial forms, replacing the landscape or pointing us back to the landscape, getting us to reimagine or be conscious of the landscape. Does seem to be clouds here, though. Huh? Yeah. Cloud cell structure, organism growing on the ceiling. Okay. We talked briefly about Anne Hamilton before, and we looked at this work. And when we talked about this work, we were talking about the link between body, language and body, right? She takes this bread, dough, inserts it into the cavity of her mouth, and then places that impression of her mouth, maybe speech, bread, speech, into this casket that accumulates the form of a body, I suppose, over time. So we talked about that link in this work. I want to show you one more of her works that is more recent. That one was from the 90s. This one is a bit more recent, earlier this last decade. And this was installed in the Massachusetts Museum of Contemporary Art, MoCA, if you ever hear that, that's what it's referring to. And this is called corpus. What does the word corpus mean? Body, right? And that has a sort of double meaning that she's gonna make use of. It means physical body, corpus, but we also refer to like the corpus of an author's work, right? That it would include all of his or her thinking on a subject, or all of it in general, all of the writing. And so that link between language and body that we saw in Malediction is certainly present here as well. And what this is this massive space that, once again, somewhat similar to the Turbine Hall, MoCA commissions one artist at a time to do some sort of a large-scale installation here. So this is what she did with it, and we'll kind of work through it. As you walk in, there are papers all over the floor, and it's the kind of onion skin paper. We haven't talked about this in this class, have we? No? No. Have you talked about it in another class? No. Okay, good. So it's an onion skin paper, and it accumulates on the floor. So she didn't just spread it there beforehand. It accumulates from these machines, these mechanisms that are on the ceiling that have stacks of this onion skin paper loaded into them. And at the rate of breathing, it takes in one sheet of paper and exhales the sheet of paper. So each of those machines on the ceiling is sort of breathing out these papers. And then once they are released, they sort of fall slowly to the floor, right? So I guess you could think of that as speech or breath, maybe a physical rendering of breath, speech, maybe because they're paper, maybe they're individual words or syllables. Also, rising and, or kind of coming down to the ground, if we take another image here. Here you can see the paper accumulating more and more. Also coming from the ceiling are these loudspeakers. And the loudspeakers very slowly descend from the ceiling, and they go all the way down to the floor, or almost to the floor, and then they slowly raise up again, right? And in each of those speakers is someone talking, someone speaking. So when they're very far up, it's just sort of noise. People talking, 24 different people talking. And when they come close, you can hear one of those people. And I believe it's they're telling stories. So, and I don't know if there's any kind of a link between those stories or a commonality to those stories. But what happens when those lower all the way down in these two rows? What happens to the space? It kind of gets divided into thirds, huh? It might divide it into aisles. I mean, it might in some ways turn it into like a nave of a church in a way. You have these aisles that develop and then they lift up. So you get these voices coming from above, I suppose, descending, forming an aisle that sort of leads you forward and then goes up. Now, if you look at the windows are covered with this kind of silk organza. Is that what you call it? Does that make any sense? That's a sort of red, fleshy kind of color, a magenta color of sorts, that the light comes in through. Why that? What does that make you think of? What happens if she covers all of the windows with that? Stained glass, good. The body, yeah, becomes a kind of membrane, yeah. And in fact, once you start to look in that way, then the ceiling and the windows start to kind of read as a big rib cage of sorts. It seems like she's taking some efforts to put you inside of a body. I think we could read this as a giant body, but it's a body that's filled with speech, whether that's speech in the forms of the paper that are being breathed out, or whether it's the speech that's in these kind of speakers that are ascending and descending. Now, that's not all to the installation. If you keep going back, there's a door back there, and it goes into a room. And unfortunately, I don't have a picture of that room, so I'll just describe it to you. In the room is dark. For the most part, there's some light coming in through some windows, but other than that, there are no lights. It's fairly dark. And all that is in that room are a series of speakers that are suspended from the ceiling. I think there are 4 of them, 4 speakers suspended from a wire hanging probably 5-6 feet or so. But they're hooked up to these mechanisms that spin the speaker. So it's like a speaker on a tether that is spinning around this way. So the speakers are doing this. And the speakers, what's coming out of those speakers is chant, like kind of a religious prayer chants, like monkish chant. And because they're spinning, they're sort of like, you get the kind of Doppler effect. But there are 4 of them going, sort of chanting. So the room is sort of full of this whirling chanting. It's a dark space, though. And then you go upstairs, and the upstairs, which has a balcony that then looks out over the rest of the body, if you will. The upstairs room looks like this. And what does this look like to you? Pews, yeah, a kind of makeshift chapel or church. These pieces of lumber are evidently taken from somewhere on the site. Historically, it had been used for something else, and they had all of this lumber, so it's from the site. I I don't know the backstory to that. But she takes them, transforms them into these benches, pews. And you get the windows, once again, with the sort of silk organza, and so it's lit up with this warm red glow everywhere. And if you turn around this way, you look back out over the main space. And what's happening in this room is another spinning that happens. It's a video that's shot with a camera that is like one of those sort of, I don't know, needle cameras or whatever, a really small camera that she puts really way up close to a typewriter. So if you click a letter on the typewriter, it hits the paper, and the camera is placed right after that. So you get these letters that go by. So it's one letter. See how you can see there? It looks like a G. See what I'm sort of looking at? A distorted G there. And it looks like there was a previous letter. So you get this video of this, these letters that are clicking by from a typewriter. And that video is coming from this projection unit up here on the ceiling, and it is spinning. So you get these letters, it's this video of these letters that are clicking by, and they're going around you. So you get spinning down below with sound, and you get spinning above with text. And here's the text, and it only comes to you one letter at a time, and I'll give it to you one letter at a time. The text goes, I-N space, T-H-E space, B-E-G-I-N-N-I-N-G space, W-A-S space, T-H-E space, I-N space, T-H-E space, B-E-G-I-B-I-G-I-N-N-I-N-G, and so on and so forth. Which spells what? In the beginning. In the beginning was the. In the beginning was the. And it sort of just goes over and over again, these letters spinning around you. In the beginning was the, in the beginning was the. And where does that come from? Yeah. If you had to fill in the rest of the quote, in the beginning was the what? Word. So it's the beginning of John. All right, see if you can piece all this together. What's going on here?
It's supposed to be like the body of Christ.
Could be the body of Christ. So that's an option. Could be. What else? I mean, you say body of Christ because it's a corporate body, right? I mean, it seems like we get one body, but it's made up of multiple voices, multiple kind of words, multiple people are included inside. So it's a corporate body, and there's a biblical reference. So it could be body of Christ. I suppose in the beginning was the Word. It could be the body of Christ. Christ is this body. Could be. Any other ideas, though?
Seems like here's what struck me was there's an absence of like words, like written words. You get the letter at a time, you get these papers that don't have words written on them. You get the sound of people speaking, but it's not like transcripted.
Yeah.
It's all these other manifestations.
Yeah. Of word. Yeah, good. So it might be, we might say, it's a body made of word, or body based on word, body comprised of words. The words make the body in a way, maybe, poetically speaking.
You even have kind of like a brain and heart drawing.
Yeah.
There's the upper, and there's light, and there's the visual words.
Yeah.
And then it's dark, and the rhythm is like a heart.
Yeah. Right. That's right. Yeah, we've got either a head heart, a mind heart, or maybe a conscious, unconscious, with the light dark. Something's going on there. One that's at least punching out discernible phrases. The other one is just noise, sort of a chanting, a song. Yeah, I mean, it does seem like we have a body with a head and at least a torso, a rib cage that's full of word, full of speech. And I think specifically the biblical reference seems to then point outside of itself. In the beginning was the Word. It's sort of it's accounting for itself in a way. Perhaps it could be the body of Christ. I think the one argument against that would just be that it's an art museum, and I don't know how much she would want to cast the art museum as the church. Although, well, maybe there have been plenty of other people who have regarded art as a new religion, a replacement. At any rate, it seems to be this corporate body, maybe a cultural body, a social body, that is, I think, sort of meditating on itself and on its origins. In the beginning was the, and I can't even complete that phrase, or she can't complete the phrase, because it refers back to itself. It's using word to speak of the word. There's something deeper. There's the possibility of words. There's the possibility of intelligibility in the body, that it's somehow underneath the words and underneath the ability to say word. In the beginning was the very possibility of this.
Well, I'm just gonna ask, like, I was thinking, like, just like the phrase, like, in the beginning was the word, and I was just thinking, like, it recalls like the idea of like incarnation, both of like Christ as incarnate, but also like the idea of somehow not even like
Send that around. I forgot.
The idea of like words being manifest, or words somehow constituting this thing, like both the sound of the
Yeah.
or like the physical presence of like the letters being seen,
Yeah.
that they somehow form this sort of body, like, so like incarnation of like just like this idea in like different forms,
Yeah.
through sound or through vision,
Yeah.
whatnot, but then also like the idea of like Christ incarnate, like,
Yeah.
as the Word,
Yeah.
as the embodiment of the
Yep,
Word.
yep. Yeah, good. That comes in physical bodily form. Yeah, good.
So would this be classified as like a form of minimalism, since it kind of refers to itself like self-referential?
Yeah, it's a good question. How do you classify this? Who knows? It's probably not quite minimalist because it's so active and so kind of, even that self-referentiality isn't all that referential, at least aesthetically, you know. So it's probably, it comes in out of that sort of sculptural installation, participatory installation kind of genre. Yeah, good. Yeah.
I was also going to comment on what she said about it, like being light and dark.
Mm-hmm.
Because then it almost makes me think of like a Christian body. Because then like you're filled with the Word of God, and it reminded me of the light and the dark thing in Matthew 6. It talks about the eye being the lamp of the body.
Right.
That makes me think like of the light part of it being like a Christian, and then the dark, like one of the verses said that if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness.
Right.
So it just made me think of that.
Yeah.
She started explaining.
Yeah, good. And I think she'll, I mean, Anne Hamilton is someone who is actually really similar to Bill Viola in this way. That I don't think she'd self-identify as a Christian. I don't know that she would self-identify. I don't know that it's important to her to self-identify in any religious category, but she's certainly pulling from them and certainly thinking seriously and sincerely about them. So I think we have to be careful to be too confident in classifying this as having a Christian message, but certainly there are all sorts of obvious Christian references being made. Yeah, good. And including the business about the body being filled with light. If the eye is good, the body will be filled with light. If the eye is bad, the whole body will be full of darkness. And what a darkness. Yeah. Yeah, good. Anne Hamilton is great. I shouldn't tell you this, but I shouldn't say this on video either. But we're working on getting Anne Hamilton. I want to end with this, and I'll end quickly with this, but to point you to one other artist who will self-identify as Christian. I think he is, in my view, the most interesting Christian artist working today. How's that for a promotion? It's a guy named Tim Hawkinson. Tim Hawkinson is an LA artist. There's Tim. Hi, Tim. And this is a work that he did in the same space, Mass MoCA, 3-4 years earlier than in Hamilton. And I think perhaps her viewing it as a body, it somewhat comes from him. I think he treats this whole thing as a body. And specifically, just to give you the really short version, it is this space that is filled with these inflated balloons that are the size of buses. They're gigantic, and they're filled with air. So I think they're lungs. They operate as lungs, these kind of organs that are filled with air. And each of those organs is attached by way of this ducting to these trumpets. And these trumpets are made out of those cement forms that you use to pour pillars, and then covered them with tinfoil. And so you get these long trumpets, each one attached to one of these lungs. And these lungs, there are 12 of them, and so 12 trumpets. I think that's important. You should notice that all of the materials he uses are Home Depot materials. They're home improvement materials, not traditionally fine art materials. They're the stuff that everyday culture is built out of, that this building is built out of. He wants construction materials, and he takes them and improvises these structures. It was shown in the Getty, that entryway to the Getty about 3 years ago, 2008. And so you get these organs. If at the Mass MoCA it was a laying down body, a body laid out on the ground, at the Getty it was like an upright torso, still with a rib cage, but filled with these organs. And the organs all are attached to one kind of heart that distributes air to all the organs, and that one heart is funded by this one massive air duct that comes in from the outside. So it's sort of like a trachea and a kind of air heart, and then all of the lungs. Okay, how this thing works, real briefly. How this thing works is that on one side somewhere is this long scroll that is running, and the scroll has marks on it, a text sort of, and he has made this contraption that reads the scroll. So it basically is comprised of all of these eyes. This is the brain of the body. If the rest is the organs, the rib cage, here's the brain, and here are the eyes. And those 12 eyes read the markings, and as the markings pass over one of those eyes, it signals one of the lungs to blast the horn, the trumpet. And because there are 12, he has a full octave. So what this does is each of these horns has one note to play, one eye that's waiting for its mark, and it signals that horn to play its one note. But it's orchestrated in such a way, because it's a whole text, it's orchestrated so that it comes out as a song. It comes out as it sings. So if you enter into this, and here you get a sense of the kind of handmade quality of the mouth piece of the horn. All of it, he just makes, which is why he's sometimes talked about in sort of mad scientist terms. I think it's a little trivializing, but you understand why. So they blast their notes, and together this thing sings. So when you're standing in this space, you're standing in a singing body. It's an awkwardly singing body, though, because it's all handmade. Handmade reeds, handmade trumpets, handmade everything. So the way these things sound is more like that's what it sounds like when it's playing. And if you walk into one of these, when it was showing at the Getty, walked in and you sort of are struck by this sort of honking foghorn cacophony that is not beautiful, and that's, it is beautiful in its own way, but it's a honking kind of cacophony of foghorns. And then I stopped and sort of realized that's the doxology that is being honked out by this kind of big body. And it is a collection of songs. The body is singing hymns. Some of those hymns are traditional Christian hymns. Some of them are like advertising jingles. There's a section from Swan Lake is in there. There's a little improvisational ditty somewhere in there. And so the thing is singing this collection of hymns, mishmash collection of hymns that include both the doxology and advertising and all of this stuff. It's a cultural body. It's our cultural body. And it sings this cacophony of hymns in the same way that we sing a cacophony of hymns. My personal kind of life song includes doxology, but it includes a lot of other odd things as well, odd hymns. And I think the point with Hawkinson is that our cultural body, for all of that kind of postmodern talk about cultural bodies, how we're mutually shaped and so on, I think Hawkinson wants to, and it is a cultural body made out of the stuff we build culture with, I think Hawkinson wants to tell us it is hymns that we sing. The cultural body is always worshiping something. It's always singing hymns in its own kind of ramshackle way. And I think that's a kind of, maybe there's an edge of criticism there, but I think that's an overall kind of constructive vision. We're always singing hymns. Let's be more careful about the hymns that we sing, so to speak. And we do it collectively. I only have one horn, so to speak. I have to contribute to a social hymn. I don't get to control it. I don't get to determine what it is. I have one part to play. You have one part to play. And perhaps together we can start tightening up some of these hymns that we sing together, each offering our one note. Okay, that was a quick handling of Hawkinson. I should have moved quicker through Hamilton, but you get the idea, huh? Any last minute questions about this? Or things you want to suggest about it? Yeah.
Question about him making this. Does he engineer all of it, with the reading?
Yeah. Yeah. He's remarkable. And remarkably, he doesn't really use assistants. He just does all of it himself, which is really unusual for an artist in his position. Usually you just have a team of assistants that help you with things. He prefers not to. So it's all, he tinkers and figures things out. Yeah. Although, don't take tinkering to be dismissive of him. I think he's a genius. It's not tinkering in a meandering, aimless sort of way. It's tinkering and experimenting with what these things can do, how I help them to voice creation's praise, so to speak.
Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Visit biola.edu to find out how Biola could make a difference in your life.